welcome back to the Lance Burkitt encounter. It's been a couple of weeks. I've been a bit busy and had a few things on, so I've not been able to get down here much and get any recording done, but we'll try and catch up with that this week. Picking up on what we talked about last time, truth in photography, I thought I might expand on that today and talk about the wider issues around truth. And there's been a lot going off in the news in the last month or so with the so-called riots and public disorder, which has come from some incidents. And I'm going to get into that a little bit, but really I wanted to talk about how freedoms have been affected this last month and what effect that might have on photography moving forward. And as you might have guessed, listening to my previous podcasts and my other musings, I'm a big advocate for freedom. And why might that be? Well, in my view, as a human being, as a natural born human, freedom is all you have. Freedom is everything. Freedom to think, freedom to move, freedom to breathe, freedom to do what you want, so long as you're not doing any harm to others. And we already have enough laws and rules and regulations in the world, and particularly the UK. But it seems to me that various governments and the people, the real governments, the people who are behind the people you see on the telly, the actual governments, have got this narrative where they're pushing more and more and more. The real people behind the scenes, the people who are actually pulling the strings, the real power, have always had a fear of regular people being free. And it's become quite apparent, particularly in the UK in this last month, that those freedoms that we still just are hanging on to need to be eradicated, and things are allowed to happen for these very reasons. So that most of the chat has been around freedom of speech, but we are starting to stray into areas of freedom of thought, freedom of expression. And when we get into freedom of thought and expression, clearly then that starts to impinge on photography and visual communication. And for me, it's not a giant leap to say you can't say that on Twitter, or you can't write that on Twitter or on Facebook. It's not that much of a leap to say you can't take a photograph of that. So that's what I'm going to kind of get into today. Going to look at some of the ramifications around losing freedoms, what it really means for creatives and human beings, as you know, outside of creativity. Just fix my mic up because I felt like I was almost laying down. So freedom. We take it for granted, and I think sometimes people forget that freedom's everything, and we're kind of so caught up in good, bad, right, wrong, law, lawful, unlawful, that quite often we knee-jerk react to things, and the general public are quite easy to manipulate with knee-jerk reactions. And currently the mood in the country is kind of, well, there's a big divide. But I think that divide is not as kind of clear cut or as big on one side as to what the narrative is saying it is. I think generally speaking, people are pissed off with successive governments, things they allow to happen, things that they say they're going to fix and never do. And I understand all those frustrations. But they fundamentally all come back to that idea of freedom. And whilst freedom is everything, and freedom should be everything, as a society, we do have to live within some kind of framework. Otherwise, it would just be bonkers. People would literally just be bonkers. And I think to live as a liberal with freedom, you've also got to have responsibility of your actions. And by that, what I mean is, just because you're free and you're allowed freedom of speech and you're allowed freedom of thought and you're allowed freedom of creativity, let's say, doesn't necessarily follow that you should do certain things. Now, by what I mean by that is, if you're not hurting anybody, if you're not directly hurting anybody in a hateful way, in a hurtful way, in a spiteful way, in a nasty way, crack on. You know, be that person. If you're going to allow freedom to let you be a bastard and let you be awful and let you treat people like shit and get away with it, then that's another thing entirely. Freedom's all well, freedom's everything, but you have to use it with some morals and a little bit of savvy. And there's that old adage, isn't there? Treat people as you would expect them to treat you. But a lot of people don't. A lot of people just see any excuse to be vile and hide behind freedom of speech, which is not really what it's for, is it? Freedom comes with responsibility, I think. Now, I'm an advocate for being born with freedom. You should get freedom as a default value. You shouldn't have to earn your freedom ever. It should be given as a default value. But as a human being, having that default value should enable you to use it wisely and with some morals and with some respect. So that's kind of my position. While I'm saying freedom of speech, freedom of thought, freedom of creativity is everything for me, it comes with a caveat of, but be respectful, don't be a dick, don't use it as an excuse to go and raid shops and smash them up and pillage, because quite rightly, if you do that, you're going to get yourself 3 years in jail, and you would deserve that, because under no other circumstance would you do that. If you're going to go out looting on the back of it purporting to be part of a protest, then you're a knobhead, you're an idiot, and you get all the jail time you deserve. And that's kind of happened a little bit in this last while, so I don't want to dig too far into the politics of it, but really it's difficult to avoid it, particularly when you see histories repeating themselves and one or two people in power have the choice to put you in jail for a minor error of judgment, or you were just a dick that day and you deserved a rap on the knuckles, but jail, no. Whilst clearly allowing other people who have done much, much worse crimes to roam free. So freedom feels a bit all to cock currently, and it's got a lot of people's backs up, rightly so. But it worries me, from a human standpoint, it worries me where our freedoms are heading, or lack of them. How that kind of mission creep, month on month and even day on day now, seems to be cutting down freedoms to the point where, when is it going to, that line between speech, thought, creativity, where's it going to bleed? And where are we going to be as photographers in terms of, you can't go there, you can't take a photograph of that, you can't stand there anymore and take a picture of that because of X, Y, Z. And I fear it's coming. I do fear it's coming. That's not a knee-jerk reaction for me. I've been thinking about this for the last month. How do the powers that be dictate narratives even further? If they control language, that's one thing, but if they control visual language as well, that's another thing entirely, and we need to be very careful we don't get sucked into actions that allow them to do that. So that's a quick overview of where I'm going to go today. If you're not interested in any of that shit, feel switch off now, go and watch something else, that's fine. If you want to have a listen to my thoughts on how it might impact on photography, and we'll look at a bit of photography as well, and we'll do a bit of photography, then stick around and have a listen, see what you think. That's a nice cup of tea. My wife reckons I make the best cups of tea in the world, and do you know something? She's right. And my mum taught me how to make a cuppa, and I'm bloody good at it. Not good at much stuff, but cups of tea, I'm the legend. So let's start by having a look at the word freedom. We have it touted around all the time, don't we? That legendary speech from Mel Gibson in Braveheart. What was it? You might take our bodies or whatever, but you'll never take our freedom. You know, something shit like that, wasn't it? It's all about freedom. And people have fought for freedom since date dot. Because quite often people who are stronger than physically and financially bully them into submission and take their freedoms, when we're all born with natural freedoms and we all lose them the minute we're born. Well, the minute your mum and dad sign that piece of paper that's called a birth certificate, your freedom's gone from then. But the word freedom in the English dictionary, in the Oxford Languages bit of the dictionary, let's have a look at what it actually means, freedom. I'll read out a couple of these examples. Noun, freedom. Freedom from, freedom froms, plural noun, freedoms. 1. The power or right to act, speak or think as one wants. So, like I said, you got freedom to do what the hell you want so long as you're not hurting anybody. That should be a given. And now you could argue that hurting people, it could be a blurry line. But I think we really all know, don't we, when you're being an arse and a twat and a noisy neighbour, or dick on the road, or picking on somebody because they're different to you. Just because you got the freedom to do it doesn't mean you should do it. So I think we all kind of sensible people, not that there's many of those around to be fair, understand the kind of basic freedom idea. Power to act, speak and think as you want. Next example, absence of subjection to foreign domination or despotic government. Now that's an interesting one, isn't it? Depending on your colours, whether you buy into the left-right paradigm, which I think is a paradigm set to keep people squabbling. There are many other directions other than left and right. Let's think on those terms. But currently, many people feel we have a despotic government, and I think when you have a proposed democracy like we're supposed to have, and then you have a leader of a party whose slim majority got him in power on very few votes, can wake up one day and decide to put the full weight of the law on a particular group of people. We're walking into despot territory, aren't we? Let's be honest about that. So we need to think about that as a society. We might agree that certain people should be thrown in jail for being dickheads, but should they? Is that power? Is that power given to 1, 2, 3 people? Just, I would argue it never is. The power to self-determination attributed to the will, quality of being, and or fate. I'll try that one again. The power of self-determination attributed to the will, the quality of independent of fate or necessity. I like that, attributed to the will, the quality of being independent of fate or necessity. Self-determination. I'm a free man. I won't hurt you. I will be good, but I want to be free. What's wrong with that? Nothing's wrong with that. It's going to time this bloody thing. I want to keep coming down. Bloody microphone. The state of being unrestricted and able to move easily. Now, mission creep from governments. They've been after something called digital ID for a long time. And what that boils down to is everywhere you go, they know who you are, what you are, shoe size, where you've been, what you've spent, what your favourite colour is, what you like, what you don't like, what you said, what you've not said. That doesn't attach itself to freedom at all. If you're going to run from anything, run from digital ID. But the state of being unrestricted and able to move easily. When smart motorways started being introduced, whatever it was, 10 years ago, so I remember saying to my friends at the time, friends and family at the time, you don't think they're making these smart motorways with all these cameras everywhere just for your safety, do you? And they weren't for safety, because look at the amount of crashes, fatal crashes on smart motorways since they got rid of the hard shoulder. There's nothing about safety. But there is now a camera every few miles, in every direction, every junction. If they want to restrict your movement, mission creep, the easiest way they can do it is to watch where you travel. And we've seen in places like Oxford, where they're trialling 15-minute cities, where you have everything you want within 15 minutes of your house and you never leave it. Now, what the hell has any of that got to do with freedom? Freedom to travel, for me, is as vital as the freedom to think, freedom to speak, freedom to breathe. And part of the wider remit from all the governments that are part of the World Economic Forum is to stop you moving. And I think part of the current narrative is to play into that very thing. And then I read an article today about whichever minister it is, whichever tosspot minister is in charge of transport or whatever it is now. Is it Gove maybe? Looking at bringing in a pay per mile idea. So whether you have to pay for fuel and pay per mile on top of that, or you, instead of buying fuel by the gallon, you pay per mile, whatever it is, tax, insurance. That's clearly designed to make people on low income not travel, not be able to travel, not be able to afford to travel. Now you could argue the Greens and the lefty loonies who are into climate change will argue that it's a good thing to get people out of cars. Well, it might be if we had an infrastructure for public transport where people could still get around, but that's never been looked after since it was privatised, and that's specifically so only posh people with lots of money can travel. They don't want the middle class and the lower class Joes travelling anywhere. That's clear. When you tie all these things together and join the dots, it's pretty clear. There's a narrative there. So freedom to travel is another thing which, off the back of the current climate, with riots and all that other stuff, freedoms to speak, freedoms to think, freedoms to travel are going to start to be chipped away at. And again, that affects photographers. Let's say you're a travel photographer. Let's say you work for National Geographic and you live in, let's say you live in Rotherham where I live, you've got to go to New York to do a piece. But you've used up all your travel credits this month because you live in a 15-minute city and you're only allowed to go out of it if you pay a tariff. What do you do? As a photographer, what do you do? Let's say you're a hobbyist photographer and you live in Rotherham and you want to go to, I don't know, let's say Scotland to photograph some beautiful scenery, but you live in your 15-minute city and you've done your social credits in. What do you do? How do you get there? Where's your freedom to create? And some of you listening to this might think, well, answers are not to talk about things that don't even exist yet, but just wind the clock back a few years and see what freedoms have been evaporated. See what choices have gone. Look at what the World Economic Forum are saying about these things. Look how many politicians have come through and worked with and for the World Economic Forum, part of their Young Leaders Programme. Nearly all of them. And it doesn't take somebody of the genius of David Icke, whose latest book I shall be reading this week, to figure out there's something amiss here. It really doesn't. So those freedoms creeping into the photography realm, and it doesn't have to be a National Geographic, it could be a fashion shoot. I live in Rotherham, I want to do a fashion shoot in, let's say, Manchester. It's 40 miles away from my house. That's 25 miles further than the 15-minute city which I'll be allowed to live in at some point in the next decade. How do I get there? Buy some social credits because I've spent mine. How much are the social credits? What's it going to cost me? Is it worth it? Or will the powers that be just deem that if photography still exists, because to be honest with the influx of AI, I'm not convinced in another 5 years photography will even exist. Will it be deemed that you've got to use somebody from your own town or your own 15-minute city? My guess is the travelling photographer will be a thing of the past the next decade or so, unless we fight it and win. So another point is the state of not being subject to or affected by something undesirable. So freedom from fear is one of the examples. And regardless on your feelings as to what the COVID narrative was really all about, look how the media and the government conspired to drive fear into the public for 3 years solid. It's come back again this week, hasn't it, with monkeypox? They tried that a couple of years ago and nobody bought it, so they're trying it again now. But if they play the narrative right and they instill some fear into people, they'll lock you down and take your freedoms away from you as quick as that, because they can. COVID was the dry run for it, and they proved they could do it. COVID was easy. People, through fear and panic, tripped over themselves to lock themselves in the house and clap when they were told, and wear a mask and stand 6 feet away. All that other bullshit bollocks that people were meant to do, most people, through fear. And all you have to do now is look at any mainstream news outlet, any government outlet. You look at the Crown, used to be called Crown Prosecution Service, what's it called now? CPS. It is those, isn't it? Those people. Their Twitter feed. They don't usually say anything about anything, but this last month they've had a running feed of who they've jailed as part of these riots. That's fear. It's it's the same as having the big poster on the wall in your street that says "dobbing your neighbours." Fear is the biggest thing. It's the easiest way to get to people. But freedom says you should be free from fear, and I don't think British people are. There's a few other statements which kind of talk about openness and privileges, freedom to move places, rights of access, that kind of thing. But I think the basic tenet of freedom is leave me the fuck alone. I'm not hurting you. I'm not doing you any harm. Just going about my business. Fuck off. Mind yours. And there's not enough of that in the world. There's not enough people saying no. Now, if you're breaking the law, even if where the laws are an ass, if you're breaking the law, you've kind of walked yourself into trouble, haven't you? But again, we can't have one or two appointed gods dictating to us what laws are when laws haven't been through Parliament and haven't been passed and haven't been ratified. If they're just their feelings, if it's just what they want to do to stamp something out, we can't have that. That's not freedom. That's not attached to freedom at all. That's tyranny. And I've thought for a long time we live in a tyranny. And when I was younger, I seriously thought we lived in a tyranny, but I was slightly wrong because that tyranny's got worse as I've got older. So although we probably did live in a tyranny, we really do live in one now. And people say, "Oh yeah, but it's not like look at, Gaddafi in Libya. Look at Hussein in Iraq, sorry, and people like that." And well, really go and research those places. Go and research them. Now I'm not saying these people were saints, but go and research them. See what those places were like to live in before the West got involved, and take a look at them now. And come back and talk to me about what tyranny is. So, freedom and the ebbing away of freedoms using nefarious things and quite often premeditated things to push narratives, to force people into actions to be able to enact these things. It's pretty clear to me what's going on, and I fear that as photographers before too long we won't have the freedom to even probably go down our street and take some pictures, and which is quite ironic given that we're the most surveilled country in the world, and I'm not even talking about big cities like London and wherever else. You go on any high street, in fact even on the street I live on a cul-de-sac, and I know for a fact that two of my direct neighbours have got Ring doorbells, and people were kind of like, again through fear, hoodwinked into getting Ring doorbells for safety, and so you can see the postman and you can tell if somebody's coming on your yard. But all it really is state surveillance, because they'll hook into that and look at what you're doing, just like they will with this or the telly, whenever they goddamn want. They will, they do, and you'll be able to get away with nothing, do nothing, say nothing. Have you read 1984, George Orwell? Got it here somewhere. 1984, George Orwell. Now in that he talks about the telly that talks to them, tells them what to do and think, and plays an anthem and makes them all do it. If you haven't read it, have a read, and then think about it. Lay it over your life, lay it over what you go through now as a normal person and as a photographer. And when you've got Joe Bloggs in the street saying, "Oh, you can't take my picture," or you've got some security guard saying, "You can't take a picture of this house," blah blah blah. Look at all the cameras everywhere, even in your own house. Your friend Amazon, Alexa, whatever the hell she's called. When you pick your phone up, you've been having a conversation with your wife, and it starts bringing up curtains, even though you've never searched for it ever. We accept it, intrusion. We accept lack of freedom, and a bit like I said a few podcasts back about photography eating itself, because we give it all away. Humans are giving freedoms away, and freedom is eating itself. And what we need to do as a society is to go, whoa, my house is my private place. I don't want TV listening to me. I don't want my phone listening to me. I don't want XYZ listening. I don't want a frigging Ring doorbell watching me every time I go out to my car and driving off. Because the first time I do something wrong, Ethel from next door will be straight onto the old bill. Look what Lance's done, I've got some proof here. But everyone was sucked into that through fear. We don't have a Ring doorbell, by the way. We got 2 dogs instead. So that's my opening gambit on freedom. and I'm going to talk a little bit about how it kind of affects photography a little bit more, and look at some examples of where we could end up as photographers if we're not careful, and if we don't fight for our human freedoms, which will attach to our photography freedoms down the line. So, freedom. So yeah, it's a pretty grim state of affairs when you're thinking about losing your freedom, when we already don't have a lot of freedom because of the laws that have been introduced over the years to curb things. I mean, remember a photography project a few years ago, maybe 6-7 years ago. I had a photography student who was doing a BA honours, and he was a first year, and he was stuck for a project. He couldn't think about ideas for projects, and we got talking about freedom. And I said, well, why don't you have a look at lack of freedoms in the UK? Use that as a starting point. He said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, you feel like you live in a free society? And he said, well, yeah, really. I can leave my house, I can come to college, uni, I can do all those things. I said, all right, okay. But within that, how much freedom have you got? And he couldn't really answer. He didn't quite get what I meant. I said, all right, stick your head out the window and just look at the first kind of like 100 yards you see, and tell me how many restrictions there are for you as a human being. So he stuck his head out the window, and he looked at me and he went, no entry sign, one way only. There's a fence there, so you can't go there. For private property, and he started reeling off his list of all these things, barriers, just in this 100 yards out of the uni window. And he suddenly started to think, oh God, yeah, I'm free, but not really. Now, you could argue that some of that freedom is moral rights. Yeah, you shouldn't be morally walking on somebody's garden. But just have a look next time you're walking down the street and you're a free person, but look at what you're restricted that you can do, where you can go, how you can be, how much noise you can make, how bright a light you can have on, how fast you can go, how long you can stay, and then have a think about whether you're free. And again, apply that to your photography skills. What restrictions do you already have on you as a photographer? And you'll probably find that you're a lot more restricted than you think you are. If you look on Google or any other available search engine, you'll find lots of photographers talking about freedom. And I don't mean freedom as in like photographing Nelson Mandela getting released from jail. Interestingly, Nelson Mandela, the Mandela effect. Have you heard of that? You see a lot of people talk about the Mandela effect. If you don't know what it is, it's some people have a clear memory of Nelson Mandela dying in prison, whereas others of us have a clear memory of Nelson Mandela being released from prison and living the rest of his life. So that they apply that to lots of things in life. So somebody remembers a film this way, somebody remembers a situation this way, and they call it the Mandela effect. And it just reminded me then, because I was thinking about that. But it plays into the holographic universe narrative quite nicely. But that's quite an aside. So when I'm talking about freedom, I'm not talking about a picture of somebody walking out of jail for free, or I'm not talking about a picture of a happy couple walking down the street, all free and loving, or kids in a playground free. Because the kids in the playground playing free are no more free than you are today, because they're in a playground that's surrounded by a fence and parents and other things to stop them from going where they shouldn't go. Now, as a parent, yes, you can say that's for their safety. It is. But if you extrapolate that into life, how many of you don't do things because of your safety? And I said this during the COVID pandemic, that I would take freedom over safety any day, and that's how I live my life. I ride a motorcycle. I love it. I don't ride fast. I'm a bit of an old man rider. But there's every chance when I ride it next time some twat could come out of a side street and swipe me and kill me. Is it safer not to do it? Yes. Is it free to not do it? No. So I'm going to ride my bike. So when we're thinking about photography, your freedoms are already restricted. And another example, a real easy example, would be you can't photograph a private building on a private land, which is fair enough. It's a law that was made to protect private lands. You can photograph them just as nice from the street, but you won't get the picture you wanted. So you've got a restriction on your freedom there because the law says so. I'm just going to look, see what I've got in my catalogue here. Not many. So over the years, I've taken photographs of god-awful wind farms. You've seen them, haven't you? Those god-awful things that you see hanging around places of beauty and nature. And I'm not going to get into the climate scam today. Not going to get into that today. That's for another day. But we'll briefly touch on it because I photographed these windmills a lot of the years. And they're bloody monstrous, horrible things. And I've blogged about this before, about the climate scam. But given the current narratives and how most people talk about that, how long before I'm not allowed to talk about that? Or how long before I'm not allowed to take a picture of them and talk about them in that narrative? And my guess again is it won't be very long, because if you look at the mission creep that's occurring between the government and the mainstream media, they don't want people like me saying climate change is a money-making scam. They want people to go, look at these lovely windmills that are much better than power stations, that are so much better for the environment, when the truth is they kill all the wildlife and they don't get decompose, so they bury them in the ground. Plus, what do people think they're made out of? Fresh air. They're made out of fiberglass and steel, and they have oil and bearings and grease and gunk, just like every other industrial piece of machinery. So, plus, they only work when it's windy, and if it ain't windy, you ain't getting no power. So, but that's for another day. But how long before I can say that? Because quite rightly, people come on now in the comments and go, "Lance, you're a fucking idiot. What are you talking about? Of course climate change is true. Of course we're killing the planet. Of course we need to have this, that." And you're absolutely well within your rights to do so. But for how long for? And I'll take a valid argument all day. I'll take your opinion all day. My opinion is mine, yours is yours. Feel free to voice it. I will never ever knock you for voicing your opinion. But how long will we be able to do that for? If currently you can't share somebody else's opinion or idea or something they've discovered, whether they think it's true or not, without being tarred with the same brush and put in prison, how long is it before that becomes, you can't show that photograph of that, you're going to jail for showing that photograph? How long? My guess is pretty quick. If we don't claw back our freedoms and get back a modicum of common sense and law, actual law, then probably within months, not years, there'll be a photographer out there does or says or shows something that doesn't make the narrative and finds themselves doing 12 to 18 for misinformation, false information, stirring up hatred. Mark my words, it will happen, because they're not just going to restrict this to the written word. They won't restrict it to the written word. They just won't. Last year I went to Amsterdam with my wife Kirsty for a few days, and didn't take a lot of pictures actually, because the weather was crap. But it was nice to see another city and take pictures of other things. But how long will I be able to do that for? As you know, I went to Rome recently. Took a load of street photographs in Rome, and the thing about Rome is it's a very liberal place currently. People really friendly, really not bothered about the picture took, didn't really care what you're doing. Very well surveilled, just like all the other major western cities and towns. But this picture on screen, example of these people just going about the business, walking down the street. How long will I be able to take pictures like that for before I'm hauled in front of a magistrate or a Crown Court judge for misinformation, or for taking a picture without asking their permission, or impeaching on their freedoms, or some other bullshit? When you consider on that street alone there'll be another half a dozen video cameras watching them come and go, and phones and tellies and other things listening to them. How long will it be before me, though, as a contributor, won't be able to do that through fear of getting banged up? Trevi Fountain. How long until I'm not allowed to say, I think it's crap? I took a picture of the Trevi Fountain. I don't see where all the fuss is. I don't know why people bother going to Italy to see that. It's a right waste of time. It looks like it was made out of plasticine. I don't see where the creative art is in that. It's dirty. It could do with a wash. I don't actually think that will. As an example, how long will I be able to take pictures of the Trevi Fountain and places like that and critique them without that critique becoming an offence? And if we allow the mission creep to keep creeping like we have done as a society recently, that might happen sooner than you think. Picture here of loads of people enjoying themselves outside the Trevi Fountain. How long before I'm not to say, let's just say, I think, look at all those idiots, look at them all. What an utter waste of money. They've come all that way to sit and look at a bunch of water and some concrete. And they're there, look at where I am, look at what I'm doing. I mean, how stupid do you have to be doing that? You pay thousands of pounds to jump on a plane, to fly to somewhere, to sit on a wall next to some water, take your picture with it, to go, look where I've been. Now, I don't actually think that. But right now, I could think that and could say that and could put that as the narrative. I could publish it on my website, I could put it on social media. And I might just still get away with it. But in months, years to come, that might be seen as incitement to hatred. Hatred of travellers. Hatred of people on holiday. And I'm being a bit facetious, yes, but if you look at some of the ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous, insane sentences that have been passed just recently for people doing stupid things, not villainous things, not horrendous things, not things that are going to damage people for life, not things that are going to kill people, not things that are going to make people's lives an utter misery, just stupid things, then it makes you worry that as a photographer and the truth you're trying to tell, how long before you can no longer do that without fear of government retribution? And I use the word government with a little g because whichever government you're talking about, they're all handled from somebody else behind us. That's as obvious as the day is long. You don't really think that Keir Starmer is that bright, do you? You don't really think that Joe Biden is running anything, do you? It's clear for all to see. They're just puppets. Now, if people want to believe that, they can believe it. They should have the freedom to believe that the government are all great and want to look after them. But other people should have the freedom to critique it. And that line between feeling free to critique something and living in fear of critiquing it and getting big brothered into a padded cell is becoming more and more and more obvious every day. And I don't say this lightly. I don't say any of these things lightly. Like I said at the beginning, people who go out of their way, who go out to hurt people, to maim people, to destroy lives, to thieve, to break, to smash up, to hurt, to be racist, to be violent. If your modus operandi is to go out and do that, you get all you deserve. But if all you're trying to do is have people listen to you and you don't know how to do it, and you do something stupid and make a mistake, then I think you should be punished accordingly, or not punished at all. Educated is probably a better way of putting it. And I'm not so sure photographers are going to escape this current wrath of government where if somebody from the CPS or the old bill that are currently scouring social media, I'm not sure how much truth is in that actually, because if you listen to the old bill, if you listen to the police service, they'll tell you that they've had a reduction in police over years, thousands of reductions, and they can't police the streets. So how the police in social media is another one. I don't know. I don't even qualified to judge what a social media post is, what context it should be taken in. Probably not. I don't want to tar everybody with the same brush, but a lot of people out there are pretty illiterate when it comes to understanding dialogue and what's been written and why it's been written and the context it was put in. So I'm a bit dubious as to how many people might be actually looking for what people are writing, or how well they're interpreting it. Probably that's the most scary thing, how are they interpreting it. And I'm not bothered if they come and look at me, because I don't do anything unlawful and I don't do anything immoral. I just tell my truth, make my pictures, and go along my happy way. And I'll reserve my right currently to critique anybody and everybody where I see fit, without slandering them or being racist or being nasty or being whatever other thing it is that I'm not allowed to do under the law, not under feelings, under the law. So what was I saying about police? So yeah, they've got time to do all that, but not time to. I'll give an example. My daughter and her partner were out on a motorbike ride. They both ride bikes, a bit like me, chip off the old block. And they were going for a ride a couple of weeks ago, and this woman, not paying attention, rode into both of them. She actually rode straight into both of them, knocked them both off, nearly killed the pair of them. Luckily, they were hurt but alive. But when they rang the police to come, the police just said, "Is everybody all right?" She said, "Yeah." My daughter said, "Yeah, we're all right. Well, we're a bit battered and bruised, but we're all right." They went, "All right, then here's an incident number." That's it. They didn't come out. They didn't check they were okay. They didn't check whether the two riders had been drinking. They didn't check whether the driver of the car who hit them had been drinking. They didn't check whether there were insurance. Nothing. Because they don't have any police. They don't see it as a priority. But if you post something on social media that somebody deems hateful, when it might just be an opinion, they'll whip round to your house and haul you away as easy as that. We need to be very careful as people and as photographers that we don't let that mentality take over and stop us from living, being free and being creative. And like I just get back to my Rome pictures, because they're recent. If you follow the narratives I spoke about in this podcast, you can realise very quickly we could lose the right to be in Rome, see a woman sitting there looking really interesting, taking a picture of her and posting it to my website, just to show you what an amazing moment I captured. Because somebody might be offended by it. Probably not the lady, because most people that are offended for somebody else, aren't they? They're not actually. The person that should be offended never is. But we'll be able to do it. Back it up a little bit. Will I even be able to go to Rome? If I'm stuck in a 15-minute city and I can only travel outside of that if I pay extortionate amounts to get out of it, to buy social credits to move around the place, am I ever going to get to photograph Rome again? Will I have to photograph somebody like that in my own town? Highly unlikely, because the last time I went to Rotherham, my hometown Rotherham, everybody knows Rotherham, everybody in the UK knows Rotherham. Sadly, not because it's a fabulously bustling town, and sadly not because we've got a good football team, although up the Millers, I always wish them well. It's because it was, well, we had one of the biggest, most horrendous paedophile grooming gang occurrences ever, that was swept under the carpet by successive Labour governments and everybody else who could have been and should have been empowered to help. And so the place is famous for that, not for what it used to be. But I went into the town centre, it must have been, I don't think I've got it on this hard drive to show you, 2023. Did I go to Rotherham then? Was it the year before? I can't see it now. It doesn't look like that. Anyway, I took my car down into town for an MOT, and I thought I'll take my camera and I'll have a walk around town. and have a look, just take some pictures around town. And it was something like a Tuesday or a Wednesday afternoon, and it's about 3/4 of a mile to walk around it, navigate around it. And I walked round for an hour while I was waiting for my car to be MOT'd, and took lots of pictures of the old buildings, all the places I used to go as kids that are now crumbling and falling down, shut, knocked down, all boarded up. Apart from 2 or 3 migrants who were sitting on a bench, who were clearly migrants because they were talking in a foreign language, and a couple of taxi drivers that I saw go through town. I didn't see anybody. There was nobody there. It was a ghost town. 80% of the buildings are closed down. Banks, gone. Shops, gone. Even the pound shops were going. And it's sad because when I grew up in that town, it was bustling. Well, as a kid, I used to live in a town. It was mad. It was a mad place. It was just bustling all the time. Markets and sellers and people and characters. From a street photography point of view now, it's like you might as well go in the desert. You've more chance of finding people in the desert than you have in Rotherham Town Centre. And again, that's one of those wider things that's been done on purpose by successive governments. But where was I? So yeah, I couldn't go to Rotherham to do any street photography because there's nobody in the streets. So where do I go if we're limited to 15-minute cities, which if the WF and their pals have their way, we will. All of the guys, of course, of climate change and all that other bollocks. One thing that always struck me with climate change and the CO2 thing is that CO2 has been somehow, the narrative's been woven to it's bad for everybody, bad for people, bad. Drive down the motorway or any country lane in your car or on your motorbike and just look at the greenery right next to where all that pollution comes out, all that CO2 coming out of my motorbike. Tell me it's bad. Tell me it's bad. The flourishing. That's for another day. So I'm really scared. I'm not scared as in I'm frightened. I'm not frightened of anything or anybody. I'm frightened, scared, conscious that as a photographer, my love for travel and street photography is going to be severely hindered off the back of current narratives. And like I've said a few times in this podcast, it won't take much for a photographer to do something probably perfectly innocent to end up in the nick, having to justify himself for misrepresentation of his own of the truth, which is his truth. We talked about truth in a podcast last week or last time, and the photographer's truth is often different to the truth. And we talked about morally telling the truth where you can. But if a photographer takes a picture of something happening and says, this is how I saw something happening, and power that be says, well, that's not what happened, get in jail, mate, which they will do, where does that leave photographers? Where does it leave creators? Where does it leave painters? Where does it leave audio specialists? Where does it leave musicians who are writing about and singing about this stuff? It leaves us all precariously one photo shoot, one record, one piece of work away from the jail cell. And that's not a world I want to, or I want my kids to live in. I want people to be able to be free to express themselves, free to tell what they believe is the truth, free to give opinion without being imprisoned for it. And I'm not arguing that some people who have been put in jail this last couple of weeks deserved it. They absolutely did. But some of them didn't either. I know I've got direct personal experience of 2 paedophiles who were caught and not jailed. Directly in my life. One, the police fucked up the investigation, lost the evidence, got away scot-free. Second person pleaded guilty and got away with it suspended. But yeah, if you either on purpose or by accident misrepresent something online, you're going to jail, mate. That disparity, that unjust weight of crime, even if tweeting something wrong is a crime, probably not. It's probably just a hurty thing. People are frustrated at it, and angry at it, and rightly so. And I'm concerned as a dad, as a teacher, as a photographer, that will translate into visuals, and before long, one of us will find ourselves in trouble through no fault of our own. And I think it's something we need to be really wary of and talk to each other about and look after each other, back each other up, because we're only a few steps away from all of our freedoms being gone. There's a meme you see doing the rounds every now and again with George Orwell reading a book, and it says on it 2024, and he's going, oh, fuck. It's a meme, but there's some truth in that. And we've got to be very careful as a society that we look after each other, that we better each other, that we jump on each other when we're being twats, and that we chastise each other when we're stepping out of line. But without freedom, you don't have a society. Without freedom, you have tyranny and you have misery. And you'll have the very few have everything, and the rest of us will have jack shit. And that's not a that's not a world I want to leave for my kids, or your kids, or your grandkids, or anybody else. I think we're all better than that. So I'm hoping photographers, not that I've showed you much photography today, and we've gone a little off-piste. I did say this podcast would sometimes. Come together and look after each other and make sure we all stick together. And if one of us gets in trouble for posting something that's what we do, then we need to look after each other and back each other up, and not stray away from the truth, and not go pleading guilty to hurting people's feelings. Because if we go down that road, then the photography industry is fucked. And I think we're all better than that. I think humans are better than that. We shouldn't let people with power go into their heads, destroy our remaining freedoms. I think it's down to us to protect them. So, thanks for listening. I'll try and get back on track with some actual photography for the next one. But I just felt like I had to get that off my chest, and hopefully some of you might have got something from that, and you might think, something's right. We need to look after photography in ourselves and make sure our freedoms aren't evaporated. So thanks for listening. I'll catch you all soon. Cheers.